Coming up on our newscast tonight. The February 28th movement is commemorated with President Moon Jae-in attending a ceremony marking the democratic event which helped lay the foundation for the Candlelight Revolution. South Korea's National Assembly wraps up the last extraordinary session of the month on a high note, with lawmakers passing many bills, including one designed to cut down the nation's drastically long working hours. Seoul's top diplomat reminds North Korea that sanctions and pressure are not designed to topple the regime, but to get Pyongyang to realize other ways to work together towards a brighter and prosperous future. NEWSCENTER begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, coming to you live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Che. Almost 6 decades ago on this day, high schoolers risked their lives to make a stand and preserve the nation's democracy. That spirit lives on, evidenced by the recent Candlelight Revolution. President Moon Jae-in attended a ceremony to remember the historic movement in Daegu and also delivered a special address there. Hwang Ho-jun starts us off from the southeastern city.
February 28, 1960 marked a milestone in Korea's democratic history when about 1,700 students from 8 high schools in the southeastern city of Daegu took to the streets to protest then-President Lee Seung-man's attempt to secure a 4th term in office through election fraud. It was the first student-led democracy movement since Korea was liberated from Imperial Japan in 1945. And on Wednesday, exactly 58 years later, a South Korean president took part in the very first government-recognized ceremony to commemorate the Daegu democracy movement. Until now, the only presidential observation of the date was made by President Kim Dae-jung 18 years ago when he went to a ceremony held by private citizens. President Moon Jae-in, in his speech to mark the day, stressed that the Daegu democracy movement was more than just a regional historic event. Rather, it's something the entire nation must remember. He said the student protests sparked a series of rallies across the nation, ultimately leading to the April 19th movement the same year and ending the authoritarian rule of the Lee administration. Moving to the present day, he pointed to the so-called Candlelight Revolution, the mass demonstrations that led to former President Park Geun-hye's impeachment and removal from office last year, saying the Daegu democracy movement was the start of it all.
그로부터 우리는 민주주의를 향한 숭고한 여정을 시작했고 6월 민주항쟁으로 거대한 흐름을 만들어냈으며 촛불혁명으로 마침내 더 큰 민주주의에 도달했습니다.
The February 28th protests were only recognized by the government as a legitimate democracy movement in 2010, 50 years later. And after a nationwide campaign in which more than 12 million signatures were gathered, including those of other democratic movement-related organizations, it was designated last month as a National Memorial Day. And that designation came with the support of the people of Gwangju, home to the May 18th democratic movement 2 decades later. President Moon praised Gwangju and Daegu for coming together to support making February 28th a National Memorial Day, despite deep-rooted regionalism and political differences. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
In the domestic political arena, the National Assembly held its last full-floor meeting for the month of February. Rival parties managed to pass dozens of bills related to people's livelihoods and also used the session to grill government officials on a recent controversial visit by a North Korean general. Kim Min-ji has the latest from Parliament.
In the last opportunity to handle legislative affairs in the February extraordinary session, the National Assembly managed to get dozens of pending bills off its plate. Among them was one aimed at reducing Korea's notoriously long working hours from a maximum of 68 hours a week to 52 hours a week, in the hope that it will improve labor productivity and overall quality of life. Also passed was a special bill that calls for the creation of an independent body to look into the deadly crackdown on a 1980 pro-democracy movement. There had been concerns that the session could be put on hold, as rival parties were deadlocked over the controversial visit by General Kim Yong-chol, who led the North Korean delegation at the closing ceremony of the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. Kim, a key official in the North's ruling party handling inter-Korean affairs, is believed to have masterminded military attacks on South Korea in 2010. But the plenary session was able to go on as scheduled after rival parties agreed to hold a parliamentary question session to grill top government officials on the matter, a continued demand of the opposition parties. Opposition lawmakers questioned why the North Korean official was allowed to visit, to which the government officials said that it was difficult to pinpoint who was directly responsible for the North's previous attacks on South Korea, and that Kim had also been involved in past inter-Korean talks, even during the previous conservative administration. With that, parliamentary affairs will be put to the side for the time being, as rival parties have yet to decide whether to hold an extraordinary session in March. Their priority now will be to prepare for the June local elections. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
As the weather warms up, it feels like the nation's air quality is getting worse. But the Korean government reassured the public the fine dust emissions level has been reduced, albeit slightly, since last fall. Park Ji-won explains further.
During Wednesday's policy coordinating meeting, Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon announced that Korea's fine dust emissions have been reduced by 7.6% since last September. However, he added that it might not be enough for the public to feel any difference in the air quality.
It would be very hard for the public to tell the difference. It is not easy to notice unless the air quality changes dramatically. Plus, fine dust policies always have limits, as there are many contributing factors, including a significant amount of fine dust particles from abroad.
In line with the Prime Minister's vow to work to solve the fine dust problem, the nation's Environment Ministry, together with Industry and Energy Ministry, has decided to shut down 5 coal power plants that are over 30 years old during 4 months from March to June. By doing that, the Korean government expects the pollutant emissions from coal power plants will be reduced by over 800 tons. It also plans to overhaul and review the 58 measures taken last year to address the fine dust problem to come up with more effective and feasible plans for this year. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The recent visit by Kim Young-chul, the ex-North Korean spy agency chair, and his frequent contact with the South's intel chief suggests Inter-Korean Intelligence communication line is restored after being cut off for nearly a decade. Oh Jung-hee explores the possibility of this turnaround leading to a deeper contact with Washington as well.
The Inter-Korean Intelligence communication line that had been cut during the past 2 conservative administrations in South Korea is now seen to have been restored, as shown by the recent visit by North Korea's high-level delegation. And it's also believed that line is now central to under-the-table contact between Seoul and Pyongyang. Kim Young-chul, who led Pyongyang's delegation at the closing ceremony of the Winter Olympics, not only serves as the vice chair of the North Korean ruling party's Central Committee, but is also the head of the regime's intelligence agency. While his schedule in South Korea was low-key, with few appearances in public or before the press, there's one person he met every day during his 3-day stay. That's Seo Hoon, the chief of South Korea's National Intelligence Service. He accompanied President Moon for the meeting with the North Korean delegation on Sunday and had a closed-door meeting as well as breakfast with Kim on Monday and Tuesday. Not only the chiefs of the 2 Korea's intelligence agencies, but also lower-level officials appear to have been in contact throughout the Olympics. Seo is seen as the key figure who will mediate communication between Washington and Pyongyang. He's visited the U.S. in late January to fine-tune the specifics for a meeting between U.S. Vice President Mike Pence and Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong, though it was canceled at the last minute. Experts believe that the intelligence agencies of Seoul, Washington, and Pyongyang will serve as an unofficial but crucial channel of communication. Adding credit to this theory is a U.S. CIA official's visit to South Korea when Ivanka Trump was in the country. He reportedly met with South Korean officials to learn what South Korea discussed with North Korea on possible Washington-Pyongyang talks. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
For too long, the United Nations Conference on Disarmament has been unproductive, which is why UN Chief Antonio Guterres called on the international community to work together and make progress in ridding the world of nuclear weapons. Dampening the renewed push, however, is North Korea, remaining defiant as ever. Won Jung-wan has the highlights from Geneva.
Diplomats from both South and North Korea addressed the UN Conference on Disarmament on Tuesday. North Korea's envoy to the UN, Han Tae-sung, said the international sanctions and pressure against North Korea to get it to abandon its nuclear program will never work. Han also said plans by South Korea and the United States to resume their joint military exercises will be a setback for inter-Korean relations, which have improved since the Olympic Games in Pyeongchang. And Han urged the Trump administration to stop what he called its provocations.
Stop all provocations that escalate tension, including deployment of nuclear assets around Korean Peninsula. Second, completely stop the joint military exercises, which is key factor that undermines regional peace and security.
Addressing Han's statement, South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa said North Korea must realize that as long as it continues down the path of nuclear development, it will only face more sanctions and pressure. But Kang also said the sanctions on North Korea are not aimed at toppling the regime, but pressuring it to abandon its nuclear ambitions.
Sanctions are not an end in themselves and are not meant to bring down North Korea, but to make it understand that its future lies not in nuclear weapons, but in working with the global community towards denuclearization.
South Korean Foreign Minister called on the international community to faithfully implement the sanctions on the North. But she also said that if Pyongyang makes the right decision, Seoul will be ready to work towards a brighter and prosperous future. Meanwhile, U.S. Disarmament Ambassador Robert Wood was adamant that Washington will never recognize North Korea as a nuclear weapons state. He said North Korea needs to drop that as a demand and respond to calls for it to halt its banned weapons programs. South Korea would like to see its current thaw in ties with North Korea lead to a dialogue between Pyongyang and Washington. However, the U.S. says any such talks will only be possible under the right conditions, that is, on the principle of denuclearization. Won Jung-wan, Arirang News.
Pyongyang's nukes are not aimed at Seoul. It is purely a defensive purpose. That's what North Korea's state newspaper Nodong Sinmun emphasized on when describing its weapons. Ji Myung-gil helps us read between the lines.
North Korea's Nodong Sinmun said in a commentary on Wednesday that its nuclear arsenal was purely for self-defense and to decisively tackle nuclear threats from the United States. The commentary said the regime didn't develop a nuclear force and an intercontinental ballistic missile at high costs just to target South Korea. The publication also said the U.S. was the aggressor, criticizing Washington for saying that the North nukes were meant to be used for reunifying the two Koreas through war. The commentary even noted that there were voices in South Korea claiming that the North nuclear weapons were a strategic asset to safeguard security on the Korean peninsula. It criticized the U.S. for being recklessly paranoid about war and disturbing the reconciliation and unity of the two Koreas. The commentary criticized the U.S. and Japan for spoiling the hard-won amicable atmosphere that Seoul and Pyongyang achieved through the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. It added that the resumption of joint Seoul-Washington military exercises is a vicious challenge to peace on the Korean peninsula. However, the commentary did say Pyongyang was ready for both dialogue and war, adding that if the U.S. attacks North Korea, it will face stern countermeasures from the regime's army and people. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
With recent high-profile visits to the South, North Korea expressed its willingness to open up for dialogue with Washington. America's acting ambassador to Seoul responded, however, talks are welcome, but not if it's just to buy time for the regime to continue developing nuclear weapons. Kwon Jang-ho shares with us his remarks.
Mark Knapper, the charge d'affaires at the U.S. Embassy in Seoul, has reiterated that North Korea's nuclear threat is the greatest issue facing the U.S. right now. However, speaking to the South Korean press on Wednesday, Knapper said that the US remains open to talks with the regime, but only if Pyongyang shows a willingness and sincere attitude towards the idea of denuclearization.
I think we've seen enough times in the past that the North has used dialogue with us, with South Korea and others, to continue to buy time to pursue its programs of nuclear and missiles development. As President Trump and President Moon have both said, we don't want to repeat the same mistakes as the past.
The acting ambassador also addressed concerns about the surprise retirement of Joseph Yun, Washington's top envoy in dealing with North Korean affairs and one who also championed dialogue and peaceful resolution. His departure has sparked speculation that it signals a change in US policy towards a more aggressive and potentially militaristic stance towards North Korea. The lack of an appointed ambassador in South Korea for over a year has also caused concern over how closely Washington is looking to work with Seoul. Knapper gave reassurances that those fears were unfounded.
Our policy remains the same. Our close coordination with South Korea will continue unabated, and we will continue to work very closely with our Korean friends and allies here in Seoul, in Washington, and in New York, going forward without any change whatsoever.
Knapper also dismissed suggestions of any further delays in the annual joint South Korea-US military drills that were postponed for the Pyeongchang Olympics, stressing that it was a necessary measure to maintain a strong deterrence posture. The drills are set to restart on April 1st and are expected to anger Pyongyang, possibly even leading to the regime resuming its ballistic missile and nuclear testing, undoing the work that has led to an easing of tensions since the start of the year. If the US and North Korea are to hold talks as they have expressed, there will likely not be a better window of opportunity than over the next month. But whether either side will soften its stance enough in time for the talks to happen remains unclear. Kwon Jae-won, Arirang News.
We're learning that North Korea has been providing to Syria equipment that could be used to make chemical weapons. According to the New York Times, an unpublished UN report reveals Pyongyang sent at least 40 shipments of acid-resistant tiles, valves, and thermometers to the country since 2012, around the time the Syrian war broke out. The report also includes evidence of North Korean missile experts visiting Syria in 2016 and 2017. The war-torn nation's government claimed they were sports trainers. The latest findings highlight the potential dangers of such trade between the two sides, as it could help Syria maintain chemical weapons supply while providing the Hermit Kingdom with the finances needed to expand its nuclear weapons program. South Korean firms are feeling a little less confident about business conditions in the country. The central bank says the slight downturn in sentiment numbers was mainly due to fewer working days in February as it overlapped with the 4-day Lunar New Year holiday. Our Kim Ji-yeon breaks down the digits for us.
Business sentiment among Korean firms worsened for the second straight month in February. The Bank of Korea says its Business Sentiment Index, or BSI, among overall industries edged down 1 point from the previous month to 77. The BOK attributes the drop to fewer working days as the Lunar New Year holiday was in February this year. The central bank also cited a steep decline among manufacturers, which dropped 2 points from the previous month to 75, the lowest level since January last year. A reading below 100 means there are more pessimists than optimists about the economy. The BSI for the electronics sector tumbled 6 points from the previous month, mainly due to sluggish sales of Apple's iPhone X that affected local sales of smartphone components and prompted display prices to fall. BSI among exporters dropped 2 points from the previous month to 84 due to increased trade protectionist measures from the U.S., including recent anti-dumping measures on steel imports. On the other hand, business sentiment in the auto sector jumped 10 points to 69 in February, as labor unions at the country's biggest automaker, Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors, called off their labor strikes in mid-January. Sentiment among SMEs recovered slightly in February after dropping 8 points in the previous month due to this year's hefty minimum wage increase. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Despite continued efforts to tackle South Korea's chronically low birth rate, the numbers dipped again last year, reaching another record low. Data released by Statistics Korea on Wednesday shows just 357,700 babies were born in 2017, down nearly 12% from a year earlier. The nation's fertility rate, or the number of babies that a woman is projected to have during her lifetime, also fell to 1.05 last year from 1.17, marking a record low. The agency attributed the trend to the decline in the number of women in their early 30s giving birth in the year 2017, projecting a rebound isn't likely in the near future due to low marriage rate. South Korea's corporate watchdog said tighter rules to protect both consumers and business rights will be in place starting Wednesday. According to the Fair Trade Commission, 39 revised rules under the Consumer Dispute Settlement Regulation will take effect, covering a broad area. Under the revised rules, airlines should compensate passengers for delayed or canceled flights if they cannot prove there is an unavoidable reason for that decision. It also allows restaurants to keep reservation deposits if customers cancel less than an hour before the appointed time or fail to show up. Drones of all shapes and sizes are becoming a more common sight in the nation, and the technology is being customized to meet the needs of various fields. The Korean government is also throwing its full support behind the industry, so it seems local developers will be able to fly even higher in the years to come. Park Se-young has the full story.
This drone is triggering rain by dispersing cloud-seeding chemicals. For the first time, Korea has successfully created artificial rain using drones.
Because the drone can take off and land vertically and fly at high speeds, it can follow the speed and direction of clouds and perform cloud seeding effectively at the desired location.
Drones are also being customized to carry out tasks for rescue missions, reconnaissance, weather observation, and pollution monitoring. And now the Korean government is pushing for the use of domestically developed drone technology at public institutions and for more technical support for local ventures.
High-performance drones with specific purposes are expected to drive the growth of the market, which is why we're developing advanced drone technology.
With continued governmental support, the drone industry and related enterprises are expected to grow rapidly. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you'll need. Michelle, we finish off the month with rain washing away the dust and relieving us from the dry weather alerts.
Well, that's right, Daniel. Now, this rain seems to be transitioning us into spring. And currently, the rain clouds have cleared from Jeju Island, but it's still wet for the rest of the nation, including the capital, and snow in places, especially over in Gangwon province. Now, although the rain has cleared away from Jeju Island, a strong wind alert has been issued. Until tomorrow morning, the southeast provinces will see between 20 and 60 millimeters, while total other provinces can expect between 5 and 20 millimeters. Upper regions, particularly over in Gangwon province, can expect snow, while Seoul will see mixed precipitation due to the falling temperatures overnight. Tomorrow, Seoul will start off the morning at 0 degrees Celsius. Daegu and Busan are warmer at 5 and 6 degrees. And the nation will be under clear skies by the afternoon, Seoul reaching up to 2 degrees. Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 7 and 12 degrees. Now, for the next couple of days, we should dress warmer because it'll be on the chilly side, but into the weekend, we should see some warmer temperatures than the seasonal average. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for you on this Wednesday evening's edition of Arirang News Center. Good day or good night, depending on your time zone. As always, thank you for staying with us.